Let me just set a bit of context for the London conference in order to stimulate thoughts and questions. There is no question. If you look across the facts, if you like, security, governance, development. Fundamentally, security has declined year on year over the last 4 years. Governance has flatlined. Development and the economy has actually done quite well. But if you look at all the data on security, you can essentially pick any series of data: civilian casualties, coalition casualties, the spread of the insurgency. They have spread from the south into the west and north in pockets. They've deepened their grip in the south and east. British casualties, just to take that as an example, went from 30 to 50 to 70 to 100, in effect, over the last 4 years. And one can always come up with explanations for each of those individual data series, saying, well, this is because of this reason, this is because we're trying harder, etc. But there is no question that the security situation has deteriorated year on year over the last 4 years, and 2009 was the toughest year yet. Governance, you mentioned corruption and other difficulties. I think governance is a mixed picture. It has, in my view, sort of pretty much flatlined. Corruption is clearly a very serious problem. Afghanistan is now, in effect, second bottom on the transparency index, although that's a perception index, so one does need to be slightly cautious about that. But there is no question that corruption is a huge problem. People have to pay, as you say, an unacceptable proportion of their income just to get the daily sort of licenses, if you like, out of government, vehicles, etc., driving licenses, whatever it might be, to license a business. And so that goes from that petty corruption of minor officials right the way up to the grand corruption that's linked with organised crime and the drugs trade. The ability of the government to deliver services, particularly in the rural south and east, is weak, and we have not developed that as fast or as effectively as we should. And we have to understand that a lot of the problems in Afghanistan fundamentally arise from a lack of capability. And I don't believe that the international community has in a focused enough way over the past few years, enabled the Afghans to really raise their own government capability. The UK approach, as you know, is to try and put as much resource through government as we can to develop the government's own capabilities and increase the affiliation of the people to their own government. That isn't the case with all other donors. Many others just go for projects that they deliver themselves with their own flag on them, and inevitably, therefore, there are risks around whether those really connect with the needs of the people, but also whether they actually build that affiliation to their own institutions, confidence in their own institutions, and the capability of their own institutions. I hope we'll see that change, but that has clearly been an issue. So I think governance, is mixed, but there are some strong ministries, weak ministries, etc. I'd say overall it's flatlined. The one really bright spot, I think, in Afghanistan has been the economy. The development ministries are well led. We've had a series of pretty good finance ministers. The current one, Minister Sedwill, who will be here at the London conference, is excellent, and is really beginning to impose a coherent approach on the development and economic agenda across government. Of course, Ashraf Ghani was the first finance minister, and people will be familiar with his very impressive track record and many of the programs that were introduced in his time. But the economy has grown fast over the past few years. Agriculture has picked up, very well-led ministry. Some of the development programs, such as the National Solidarity Programme, grassroots development projects out in the rural villages, are state-of-the-art and are good compared to any other country in the world, really, any other developing country in the world. So I think that's the picture that we face, and that's the context for the London conference. What's the strategy, and what's sort of my new job about? Well, my new job is about not imposing, because you can't, but it is trying to lever, corral, enthuse better coherence, better coordination across the civil and political agenda in support of or alongside the military agenda to improve security. The overall strategy, again, people in this room will be familiar with it, but just let me repeat it, is to regain the initiative against the insurgency, primarily a security function. And that, I think, we will see some big differences in this year, not only because of the surge of forces, an additional 40,000 US and NATO troops coming in. The Obama administration has doubled the number of US troops in Afghanistan in a year, or will have done by the time they all arrive, from 50 to 100,000. It's a very significant, very significant uplift. But alongside that is this intense embedded partnering that General McChrystal has introduced with the Afghan forces. And so that means that security operations will have the punch and capabilities and flexibility that the ISAF capabilities can bring to them, but they will have an Afghan face on them. And we will have Afghans and international forces operating together. Personally, I believe that will make a difference not only to the Afghan forces, but to the ISAF capabilities as well. If people are out on patrol, and counterinsurgency, as people in this room will know, is about being out among the population, then Afghans alongside international forces simply understand the environment they're operating in instinctively in a way that no foreigner in any environment possibly can. So I believe, and I know that General McChrystal, much more authoritative on this than me, believes that we can regain the initiative against the insurgency this year, and I think we'll see some big operations to try and do so over the spring and summer. I think the second big area is to strengthen Afghan institutions, military and civil, and that is about both at the national but particularly the provincial and district level in the focus districts to improve Afghan governance, and we've got teams going out to try and help them build up their capabilities, obviously also the Afghan security forces, but enabling the Afghan state to compete directly with the Taliban, the shadow governors you mentioned, compete head-on on security and justice, and exploit their advantage in the areas the Taliban can't compete, which is economic development and jobs. And those haven't been effective enough. I believe we can do that. And then thirdly, and this goes to the point you made about reconciliation, addressing those political tensions, those political grievances that fuel the insurgency, whether they're at village, district, tribal, ethnic, and indeed even regional level. And it's always very difficult to tell, but probably about 3/4 of the insurgency, maybe more, is not really hardcore Taliban. In a sense, they're fighting with the Taliban rather than for them, and they're doing so for a wide variety of reasons. Something like that number of insurgents, we believe, fight within 10 or 15 miles of where they were born. In many cases, it's a syndicate insurgency with a lot of local issues driving it. And whether or not the core Taliban are ever reintegrated into the mainstream Afghan political and economic life, those 3/4, if you like, of the insurgents have to be. Otherwise, whether the Taliban are there or not, we're going to have continuing instability. That just means Afghanistan, at the very least, would remain contested space.
Can we talk about that point in particular? Yeah. In the context of the London conference, it has been leaked, I guess, that the reconciliation plan is going to involve a sum of, the figure I've seen is $500 million over 5 years, with Pakistan playing a kind of mediating role between negotiating on bringing together the Taliban and the Karzai government. Is that roughly the shape of things?
I think that probably adds a few things together and creates sort of, adds two and two together and comes to slightly more than four. If you like. Reconciliation is an important part of the London conference, and if I can just speak briefly about the London conference, and then I'll come back to the specific point. The purpose of the London conference is to take that agenda and essentially pull it together and energise it over the next year. Commitments on the Afghan government side, commitments on from the international community. The theme of it is Afghan leadership, international partnership. That's very deliberate. This is the first conference which the Afghans are really setting the agenda for, rather than essentially being in receive mode, which has been the case in the past, and we're trying to use this conference in a sense as a turning point in their capabilities. And it is essentially to try and set that agenda on these issues, security governance development, over the next year to 18 months, followed up by a conference in Kabul later in the spring when we'll see more detailed implementation programs. On the specific point of reconciliation, I'm not going to preempt the conference by announcing what I think are going to be the specific outcomes. You'll understand that would get me into enormous trouble with political leaders all around the world, and since I now, from today, have 44 political leaders to satisfy, not just one, I'm going to be cautious on that.